Well, good afternoon. I'm Mark Donohue, and this is Barbara Marx Hubbard.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon.
I've been so blessed to have Barbara in my life for 25 years as one of my core mentors and teachers. And of course, she's been one of the leading evolutionists, systems thinkers, and social architects since the 50s. And I believe is the elder in the room. And I'm so appreciative of all the wisdom you've taught me.
Well, I'm always the elder in the room. It didn't used to be that way, though. Yes, thank you.
Well, if Ray Kurzweil has his way, I don't think you'll be that older
well, that's
much longer.
right. After a while, it won't matter how old you are because you're getting newer.
Yeah, well, you say that. You get newer every year.
Yes, I don't get older. I feel like I'm getting newer.
Yes, and Barbara and I have been collaborating since the 90s when I co-edited her book, Conscious Evolution, The Awakening of Our Social Potential, which was really about conscious evolution, which is one of the seminal thoughts we'll talk about today. And I'm going to be speaking for about 5 minutes to give a little context to part of dialogue and part of presentation. It's not really quite a fireside chat. And it's really an honor and a lot of fun to be here at Singularity. I've been studying with Peter for over 4 years and very active in Singularity. And we believe that the whole nature of our co-creative conversation that we're going to have today, which is about the future of entrepreneurship at a foundational level, is very intertwined also with an evolutionary perspective on how we look at life. And Barbara obviously has been a leading voice in that area for 60 years. We see Singularity playing a seminal role in the future of humanity that's commensurate with our regenerative capacities. And through the actions of exponential entrepreneurs and the global community that's gathered here, we see the next level of potential. The first 10 years were great. What we see and what we're going to be inviting Singularity into here, and some of the visions we have for a guiding story around the exponential megatrend on the planet, we believe will be of value to the entrepreneurs and everyone who's part of this movement today. In the last 25 years of my study of entrepreneurship, having been entrepreneur in residence at the #1 entrepreneurship school in the world for 5 years, and having been a practitioner in all forms of entrepreneurship, I realized that it really has the greatest power to impact evolution itself and humanity's success. Entrepreneurship is an amazingly powerful tool. And we're at such a critical time of radical breakdowns and radical breakthroughs in society. And it's very interesting when you start to look at the nature of evolution, the nature of nature. It has a tendency that keeps on repeating, and Barbara's books, 10 books, talk about this, but one of them that is seminal is that evolution radically concentrates power to where the solution to the crisis of the era resides. And that makes sense. Think about it from a Darwinistic standpoint. Why would evolution concentrate power where the solution wasn't? And so when you look at crises, let's say in a pre-human sense, just to give an example, we had single-cell life on this planet, and this terrible toxin was accumulating in the atmosphere, and life was dying as we knew it, and there was radical transformation. That radical transformation was to multicellular life, and it started to digest this toxin called oxygen. That's an example of crisis preceding birth, and the whole nature of radical new power coming in, of creativity really, and of creation. And each time there's a crisis. And when we say crisis, you'll learn in our talk that there's certain evolutionary principles that we believe are foundational to evolution itself and to your lives. And so a crisis would be something that's starting to impede upon or destroy some of those evolutionary tendencies, like our movement toward greater consciousness over the last 13.7 billion years. That's something that evolution is encouraging, and if anything that reduces consciousness, reduces freedom, is something that actually is against the direction that we're heading in our own existence. In human times, there are lots of examples of radical concentration of power, but some of them are mimetic. They're guiding thought forms like democracy, or even things like human rights. Because the nature of evolution is a creation story. And so creation stories want to create interaction, and the more interaction creates the more attraction. The more attraction creates the more creativity, creates higher levels of consciousness, freedom, order. So human rights, for example, the rights of the individual, the abolishment of slavery, is actually very much based on a natural evolutionary principle. And we could go through, lots of examples like this. You understand when we talk about evolutionary principles, some ways to ground that, and you're thinking about it in a practical sense in our lives and our times. And today we're facing a crisis of global magnitude because we have a tipping point of tipping points with many different crises, whether that's environmental or even the threat of nuclear war still being quite present. And importantly, we have no experience of making decisions at this scale as a human species and with this level of power. We really are at a new point. This has never happened before. And it's an evolutionary point of enormous import. And we believe that today's generations are fundamental in the future of either creating a future that will devolve or evolve to our full potential as a species, because we are at the tipping point of tipping points. Today, the majority of the most effective solutions are not coming from governments, houses of worship, civil society, NGOs, or even business as usual. Businesses, oftentimes, through the forces of entropy today, a lot of companies are getting destroyed. So the question that we ask then, if evolution has this tendency that's recurred consistently to radically concentrate power to where the solution is, to the crisis of the era, and certainly arguably, and we believe certainly, this is the time of greatest crisis in known human history, where is that power concentrating today? And so our answer is that it's in the hands of entrepreneurs, but within that subset, it's in the hands of technology entrepreneurs and then exponential technology entrepreneurs particularly. And Singularity University is almost a unique ecosystem of concentrating, catalyzing, and creating community of these individuals receiving this radical concentration of power where we believe nature and evolution intends the greatest solutions to the crisis of the era to be born. And if you think technology is moving fast, obviously, as we all have heard, this is the slowest it's ever going to move again in any of our lifetimes. And as Ray says, Ray Kurzweil, we're no longer computationally constrained, we're only imagination constrained. So this radical concentration of power, though, into the hands of few has happened at different times in history with certain individuals, whether that be in spiritual houses or the DC family and certain era, or we could go through certain lists of times, and oftentimes it has not worked out well. So it's going to be interesting to see how we steward this concentration of power into exponential technologists' hands and into all entrepreneurs' hands. And we believe everyone in the world is an entrepreneur. Being a mother is very entrepreneurial. So this is a practice that we have and a worldview that we have, that we're all part of a creation story, and entrepreneurship just happens to be a tool to manage that. And many billionaires and incredibly successful technology entrepreneurs have already been doing very purposeful things with that wealth, whether it's the Giving Pledge or other initiatives. Yet there does need to be a new story, we believe, because stories are so important to society, that helps to bring together this radical concentration of power and helps us steward, mentor, lead, guide the next generations. Because there are so many 15-year-olds today in the world who are going to have unimaginable power 25 years from now. And how do we actually help them become human beings that can create a meaning to our power that is good? And so we really are looking at that broader context. And fortunately, we have certain lessons from history, as we're going to be talking about today. I will just say that the first line of our forthcoming book, Living in Exponential Creativity, is that the universe is the greatest entrepreneur in known history. And so there really is a lot to learn from evolution itself and principles that we can actually bring forth today. And the importance of developing a new world idea made me get very activated to re-partner with Barbara based on our deep work in the 90s and my love of her and her worldview of conscious evolution, which she brought forth from really around 1952 forward. And when you combine that worldview with the exponential technologies and the forthcoming potential for abundance on this planet, we believe a radical shift is afoot. So, Barbara, could you share some of your insights and discoveries, and how did you develop conscious evolution as a worldview, which will be part thematically of what we're talking about today?
Thanks so much, Mark. Well, it's amazing that we didn't know we were evolving. And Einstein thought it was an eternal universe. So something radically new happened in the 1960s, which was the discovery of the new story that we are evolving from nothing at all to everything that is. So conscious evolution is new because this story of evolution is new for humanity within our generation. And what it means is that humans are given the power to choose evolution. What direction do we want to go in? And in this simple sentence, conscious evolution is evolution by choice, not chance. We had no idea in the earlier days that we were affecting evolution. And now we see we're affecting it by everything we do. The thoughts we think, the cars we drive, the food we eat, the babies we have. We have become participants in evolution in our lifetime. It's not taught in the universities. It's not a religion. It's hardly even known in our technological societies that we have suddenly entered evolution consciously. So what does this mean we have to do, and how do we know to become conscious evolutionaries? Well, the best way that I learned it really is by studying what evolution has been doing for 13.7 billion years. I mean, how did it get from that Big Bang to us sitting here in this room on exponential technology? Is it really the right place to ask this question? And so if you look at the billions of years of evolution, and I'm seeing it right here in front of me in this large chart, and you'll see it over there. You'll see the Big Bang, and then you see that we have discovered, and the scientists began to map this once we discovered the Big Bang, that there is a sequence in evolution that is pretty obvious once you have seen it happen. The formation of the universe, the formation of Earth, the formation of life on Earth, the formation of animal life on Earth, then human life on Earth. And the thought is that this evolutionary spiral is going around the next turn now, because we have gained the power to affect evolution by everything that we're doing. And when you look at this, you see that golden thread going through right to the center of the wheel there. What is that? And that, we're calling it the impulse of evolution. It's an amazing, awesome reality on the inner plane that is now activated in every one of us as our own purpose. And the direction of that inner impulse is toward more complexity, more consciousness, and more freedom. And as we look at our turn on the spiral, we begin to see that's exactly what's happened to us. We have ever more effect on everything that we're doing. We have more consciousness, we have more freedom, and we have more capacity to choose. So conscious evolution is the very first time that our species has said we're going to be conscious participants in our evolution evolution. And that means that when we look at our turn on the spiral, and when we look, we call it the wheel of co-creation. There's certain really interesting lessons that we've learned from looking at this. One lesson is that crisis precedes transformation, that problems are evolutionary drivers, which is very much what Peter Diamandis is talking about. If for a singularity, when we see a crisis, then we are starting to look for the solution, and the solutions give us more capacities as we respond to the crisis. So it's a very different attitude than we've done something wrong. Crises are intrinsic to evolution, and we have enough of them to awaken the potential of our species at a scale that never was possible before. And then if you look at the impulse coming through the core of that spiral, what you see is that it could be called purpose. It could be called the purpose of evolution, and evolution has been purposeful all along. So what I would like to just conclude this thought, that conscious evolution is the awareness that evolution is working toward ever greater freedom, ever greater awareness, and ever greater possibility of participating in the story of evolution. And that we are at the stage of the first time in human history where we know that our acts can affect our own evolution. And by looking at this process of creation, of social synergy, as we'll talk about in just a minute, how nature creates greater and greater wholeness by connecting separate parts to make a new whole, greater than the sum of the parts. So I turn it to you, Mark, for...
Well, certainly evolution, while having purpose in the way Barbara says it, some people would say it has direction. And so when we talk about direction, again, toward higher consciousness, greater freedom, higher order, one of the things we find with higher order, Prigogine got a Nobel Prize for this, Mr. Prigogine in '86, for his theory of dissipative structures. In higher ordered complex systems, you actually have a situation where they can recombine in ways that digest entropy. So we're not going to a heat death on the planet, as a lot of scientists say. And so essentially, when you think about human beings now being essentially part of the eyes and the ears and the consciousness beyond the rest of Gaia and the planetary biology here, really we have this ability, though, with human beings, though, to have this combination of conscious awareness, radical new powers, and also this understanding of the direction of evolution, which has gone toward greater freedom, greater higher order, greater beauty, greater consciousness. We say greater order and connection. That also, when you talk about interaction, connection, creativity, in a human sense, that also means greater empathy, greater love, greater connection in all the ways that could be embodied. And as Victor Hugo said, there's nothing as powerful as an idea whose time has come. And we certainly feel that the evolutionary context of conscious evolution as a guiding perspective for society to realize the nature of our power and the nature of our choices is crucial as a worldview when we look at the powers today that we have. And it's non-sectarian, it's something that even scientists can agree to, that yes, there is an evolutionary story here, there is certain tendencies. We don't need to run 1,000 million experiments to see the obvious that consciousness has kept on increasing and freedom and order has. And to be a great global culture, though, we have to be part of a great shared story. And let me just repeat that again. To be part of a great global culture, you need to be part of a great shared story. And Barbara, you've been bringing forth a new story of our times for over 70 years, conscious evolution. And today we're born into unimaginable powers, what Teilhard de Chardin, with the noosphere defined as all knowledge, as opposed to the atmosphere and biosphere. And an 18-year-old has the powers once attributed to God. And you've been asking this fundamental question additionally, which is so seminal, since the late 40s, which is so amazing to say, what is the meaning of our power that's good? How did that question arise within you?
Well, the question arose, I was 15 years old when the United States dropped the first atomic bomb on Japan. And up until that point, I thought everything was good, and we were good, and life was good, and we're going in a great direction. And I suddenly saw, when that bomb dropped, that we had the power that we used to attribute to gods. And we were clearly not going to be kind. We're not going to be good. We're not going to be generous with this power. But in my youth there, I asked the universe, starting with just in general, what is the meaning of all this new power that's good? So I thought, well, clearly somebody knows. And the first thing I tried to do was join the Episcopal Church to find out from the minister if he could tell me what he thought the meaning of our new power that was good. We had no idea. And he said I should go to Sunday school, where I found actually that Eve was the problem. So that didn't stay there. And then I went to Bryn Mawr College. And I wanted to take a course on the direction of evolution. Where are we going that's good? And obviously, there was absolutely no course in that. And then I went to Paris in 1948 for my junior year abroad. And the Renaissance worldview of technology and democracy and hope actually had been destroyed by the two world wars and the atomic bomb. So what we saw was existentialism, nihilism, absurdism, materialism, and there was absolutely no sense of direction and hope. And I was hopeful from the inner plane of my being, but I looked ridiculous to be hopeful in the face of what humanity had done and the millions and millions of people that had been killed by the most sophisticated nations in the world. So one day I was having lunch alone and I met my husband, the man who I was going to marry, and I asked him my question: what do you think is the meaning of our new power that's good? And he said, I'm an artist and I'm seeking a new image of humans commensurate with this power. And if a culture doesn't have a story, then it doesn't know what to do with its power. And we obviously had only the story of our destruction and of our loss and of our materialism. So anyway, my entire life became dedicated to the discovery of this power. And I believe it was when I asked the question, I finally began to discover from the direction of evolution, which I got from Teilhard de Chardin, the direction of evolution is greater consciousness, more connectivity and more love, and more intelligence. You can see it from single cell to multi-cell to animal to human. So the meaning of our power, I realized, is for each one of us to do a lot of what's being advocated here at Singularity, is to find our purpose, to say yes to the creativity, and to begin to look at the direction of the future that we want to go in that does give us more consciousness, freedom, and order, which I think we'll discover as we look at the connection of all those parts in our turn on the spiral. Health, education, economics, science, and technology. There are innovations in every sector of this wheel.
Hey, Barbara, can you tell that quick story about when you met President Eisenhower in '52?
Yeah. So, well, as I said, I was asking everybody that I could think of, and my father happened to know President Eisenhower, and he took me into the Oval Office to meet directly with the new president. And obviously it was a courtesy call. And the president said, hello, young lady, what can I do for you? I said, Mr. President, I have a question for you. Yes? What do you think is the meaning of our scientific, technological, military, industrial power that's good? He looked at me and he said, I have no idea. And so I thought, well, you know what? We better find out. And I think that that's actually what we're doing here. It's trying to find out.
Exactly. So what was next after that conversation with Eisenhower? Because you had so many seminal thinkers in your life like Maslow and Jonas Salk and others that you work with?
So then I decided to see if I could find it written anywhere. And the person who really best understood it was Teilhard de Chardin, which I mentioned because Teilhard de Chardin, a Catholic Jesuit paleontologist, never published in his lifetime, he wrote a book called The Phenomenon of Man. And in that, he identified that evolution has purpose, direction, and meaning. And he didn't call it God. He just actually saw it as a scientist, which was what made it so important. And I realized when I read Teilhard de Chardin that that internal direction of consciousness, freedom, and more complex order was actually inside me. And the beauty of this is that that is both external to us, but it's internal. So every one of us has a unique purpose, a desire to express, a need for connectivity. And when I realized that that purpose inside of me was evolution awakening in person, it actually changed deeply my understanding of what it means to be a person.
And clearly your work with Maslow was seminal, because Maslow was the first person to study healthy people, which was radically new. People were being studied that were unhealthy. And when Barbara collaborated with Maslow, what she learned was that self-actualizing people, the key quote is that they have chosen work they found intrinsically self-rewarding and of service to others. It's a direct quote from Abraham Maslow. And in your work with him,
Yeah.
and given our perspective on the new role of entrepreneurs as leaders in our collective journey, we've created a new name for entrepreneurs that have this Maslow-inspired yearning of chosen work of service to others. These entrepreneurs intuitively understand the meaning of our power that is good. And we call this new societal role evolutionary entrepreneurs. And there are certain core foundations of that. And some of the characteristics of how we define an evolutionary entrepreneur, and there are 5 of them. One is that the entrepreneur understands evolution's recurring organizing patterns, of which there are many and that are clear that we can learn from. Another is understanding that there's this whole pattern of breakdowns and breakthroughs where crisis oftentimes precedes birth. And then a third is this whole area of synergistic convergences. And Barbara was a seminal leader in the 70s in running what are called SynCons. So bringing together the best of what's working to create a synergistic convergence to create a whole new out of the disparate parts. Bring together what's working to create new as opposed to combining breakdowns to create devolution. So that's a whole synergistic convergence process which we're inviting and believe that Singularity is part of, but we feel there's another level of convening the exponential technologies, the exponential leaders to actually have a convergence that's more directional and curated by Singularity to take it to the next level of leadership, not just convening. And it's wonderful what Singularity does. And then a key aspect of this is very Maslowian. The Maslowian aspect of chosen work of service to others is really this aspect that's evolutionary built and nature built, which is really having purpose beyond self. These evolutionary entrepreneurs understand they can't be completely fulfilled as a human being and self-actualized if they're just in self-interest. And this is very important as this power gets radically concentrated, that individuals have that true north in their emotional mindset, and that hopefully they follow principle number 5 as an evolutionary entrepreneur, which is connecting to one's evolutionary impulse, which then connects one to the whole. And there's a whole part there of just tuning in. So Barbara, how do you see the context for evolutionary entrepreneurs?
Well, it's very clear to me that given the fact that we're at a point of evolution where we could go into devolution and extinction, or we could go into evolution at the next stage, the exponential entrepreneur has the power to shift the system. And if the exponential entrepreneurs feel themselves to be connected with evolution, the guidelines of greater consciousness, more freedom, more loving order applied to exponential entrepreneurship actually is the shift point.
Well, clearly, and nature does not preserve species. Nature preserves purpose. And this is a key aspect of evolutionary entrepreneurs, that they're purpose-built. And that really will be more sustainable from that standpoint. And with conscious evolution, we see nature's purpose toward greater freedom, greater conscious, more complex order. And we're now at this point where we're trying to connect and communicate the group of entrepreneurs out there that are evolutionary entrepreneurs, because there are already millions of them. And it's about naming that movement to fulfill our greater potential. We need new leadership in the society. And it's very interesting when you start to look at foundationally also what's even happening with the technology. I was in a dialogue with Ray and Peter, Ray Kurzweil and Peter Diamandis about 2 weeks ago down at Singularity. I was in a 4-day retreat there. And I was dialoguing with them about empathy and the nature of the singularity when we actually are merging with technology more, and we expand our processing capacity, expand our memory. And I was saying, well, what does that mean humanistically, emotionally? Does that increase empathy? And Ray, very interestingly, with Peter said, what we believe, which is the radical acceleration of empathy happens at that time. Because people can try on others' experiences, because you have this expanded ability to, in an augmented or virtual reality world, actually try on. Empathy is the nature of being able to experience somebody else's experience, which is really rather fascinating. And we're really on the edge of birthing an exponential humanity. It's more than exponential technology. So, Barbara, as you look back over 65 years and look at this whole inflection point here, what do you see now? What's the awakening?
Well, I actually believe we're becoming a new species. If you combine high tech with evolutionary spirituality, with greater consciousness, more freedom, more order, which is the direction of evolution, if you combine exponential evolutionary technologies with the new power of humanity, or in simple terms, if you combine love and high tech, you have a new species, and we're just barely at the beginning of it. And I think the way we experience this new species on a personal level is we feel a deep impulse of spirituality that isn't just given from above. It seems to be internalized within ourselves as greater purpose. Is that so? Is that feeling internally of greater purpose? That would be part of what's happening to us as evolutionaries. And then as we begin to find our purpose, we actually see that we're affecting our own evolution by everything we do. So we have to notice what direction we want our society to go into. And we have to see that we need an evolution of synergy. And I want to just say something about Ilya Prigogine here, which you mentioned briefly, Mark. Ilya Prigogine studied how did nature go from disorder to higher order for billions and billions of years? How did a dysentropy go to syntropy? And here is his simple statement. As a system becomes more complex, it uses more and more of its energy in handling its own dysfunctionalities. And you can see that happening now. Meanwhile, in that system, there are innovations of all kinds in every one of those fields that are mentioned there in that wheel of co-creation. And so as all these innovations are arising, at some point, he said, there is a nonlinear exponential interaction of innovations. We're very close to that at Singularity here, that there's a nonlinear exponential speed up of natural tendency for innovations that are working to connect with each other.
And in fact, today, if we just connected the high points of our spiritual, social, and technological brilliance, you'd really see the outlines of the awakening of that new species, which, again, is not a biological awakening, it's a mimetic, it's a new meme, it's the whole thought form, it's the connection with each other in a much broader understanding as we consciously evolve with this great power that we're being given.
And I just want to point right in here, just to finish the Ilya Prigogine thought, that the nonlinear exponential interaction of innovating elements leads to newness. And so it's not only that we are becoming new individuals and to some degree a new species with this power, but the whole system that we're part of, you can't look back to improve it from some past part of evolution because the system itself is going to radical newness.
And all the best of us and the worst of us is being amplified by technology radically today as we're upon the birth of what Barbara's named Homo Universalis. So Homo Universalis is this awakening of our society. And given this context, we ask as we're coming to the end of this in the last few minutes, what is Singularity University's role in all of this? And Singularity has awesome power to manifest and to articulate. And it's been a wonderful convener and leader, and we believe this is the next level of its leadership. And Singularity can catalyze the creation of a new whole system out of disparate wholes, which is the nature of evolution itself. The new whole will be far greater than has ever existed before, and ultimately Singularity is a catalyst and a leader in the awakening of this new species to fulfill our full human potential. Yet within the evolutionary story, which is very logical, scientific, non-sectarian, and Singularity's programs, even like the Global Solutions Program, now called Global Startup Program, are just reflections of what they're trying to do, but it's about bringing that all together and creating synergistic convergences at the next level. And given Singularity University's educational role, we believe a logical starting place is for Singularity to ask the most powerful questions of our times to the most radical concentration of power in human history, which is to the exponential entrepreneurs. And these types of questions might include, again, we're not trying to be dictative, we're trying to encourage a facilitation, a symposium, a discourse of the people receiving this power so we can help guide the next generation. So some questions might be that people in this room might want to reflect on. How do we guide our generation, our next generation of radically empowered exponential entrepreneurs to align with an evolutionary purpose and the use of their powers for our common good? What's the meaning of our power that's good again? Barbara's question for 75 years. And in developing the new story of a democratized, decentralized, and cooperative exponential creativity, because we're all living in exponential creativity, what visions will best activate humanity to more fully realize its full potential? A third question would be, at a core level, we're all entrepreneurs. Since the whole of our existence is increasingly creative, how do we catalyze a movement of evolutionary entrepreneurs, which is as inclusive as possible? And a fourth one would be, how do we further the context of conscious evolution as an upgraded operating system for humanity to realize that we do have choice. We have choice individually, we have choice collectively, and we have the power to create really heaven on earth. Our last question that we'd put out, just as floating some balloons in this area, for what purpose did nature build you? And what future do you choose? And are you choosing evolution by choice or evolution by chance? So Barbara, when you hear all of that and we reflect on this, and as we're coming to our closing, I know that you've really been such a student of the Founding Fathers. And does any inspiration come to you?
Well, I did invent a new Thomas Jefferson statement. And I suggest that he might have said today, we hold these truths to be self-evident. All people are born creative. Endowed by our Creator with the innate creativity for greater consciousness, greater freedom, and more complex order. So in some respects, we can see what's happening here as the evolution of our democracy itself. And at a time of confusion, what is the direction of democracy? I think Thomas Jefferson would have said something like that. And I'd just like to add that by seeing the system as a whole at its innovative edge in every one of those sectors of the wheel and helping to bring them together, I think what we'll find that we are already becoming a new civilization. But
I love that quote, by the way, with the inalienable rights and responsibilities to express our creativity for the good of ourselves and the whole Earth family. It really is a new manifesto for our exponential humanity.
I think so. I think so, and I think it's a great privilege to see what Singularity is able to do to help initiate this movement. If we want to say a new movement is being born towards exponential creativity, love, and moving in the direction of evolution, I would say Singularity University is taking a tremendous role to initiate that.
And after all, who else is better positioned to do this? We believe Singularity University is uniquely positioned to lead at this seminal moment in time. Join us to inspire future generations with the goodness of your actions today. We are conscious co-creators in an ever-evolving universe. Thank you very much.